Hello everyone, I'm Thomas, and today I will be presenting a deontological analysis of corporate labor rights. Specifically, we're going to look at how Immanuel Kant's ethical framework evaluates use of sweatshops in global supply chains. So, the goal for this presentation is to evaluate corporate negligence of workers' rights using the lens of deontology. We're going to be focusing on a real world scenario that is going to be a corporation that operates sweatshops in Bangladesh to minimize manufacturing costs. So, to do this, we are going to be using three key concepts, which are duty, conscious, and categorical imperative, which was structured by Immanuel Kant. So, before we dive into a scenario, let's firstly define what deontology is. The word deontology comes from Greek word deon, which means duty. Like other theories that judge an action by its results, deontology focuses on the rightness of the action itself. So, regardless of the consequences, it stands in direct contrast to utilitarianism, which we started last week, by the way, where only outcomes and overall happiness actually matter. Now, let's talk about the categorical imperative, the CI. So, Immanuel Kant, who is the father of deontology, he believed that we have an inner voice or conscience that guides our moral decisions. So he called this the categorical imperative, or the CI, where imperative it is basically a command, and categorical means that it can be applied in every situation without any exception. So it is an unconditional moral rule that tells us what we ought to do simply because it is the right thing to do. You know. Now let's get into our scenario right now. Yes, why? As you can see here, in our globalized economy, corporations often seek out low wage labor in developing nations in countries like Bangladesh, Venezuela, to maximize profit. These sweatshops are often defined by excessive working hours, unsafe environments, and wages that are below that a human needs to survive with. So, from a conscience perspective, we must ask first, is this business actually like a model morally permissible? Or is it just a violation of our universal duty and human rights? Now, let's see. So, Kant provided three ways or three formulations to test if an action is actually moral. The first is the formula of universality, in which Kant says we should only act according to rules that we will want to become an universal law. So, in plain English, this means that if everyone in the world did the same thing you are actually doing, will still or will society still function? That's the question. Now, the number two. So, sorry, applying the number. Yes. So, to test a such model, we must identify the maxim or the underlying rule of the action. So here, the maxim is a company may exploit vulnerable workers whenever it increases profit. So if we actually universalize this, like the global workforce will eventually collapse or revolt. So business itself will become impossible because the rule that destroys the very system it relies on. So it is logical contradiction, and therefore it is immoral. Now, the second formulation talks it's about humanity, the formula of humanity. Kant argues that we must treat humanity always as an end in themselves, and never merely as a means to an end. So this is based in the idea that every rational being human, every rational being has intrinsic dignity and value, all of us. Okay? So now let's apply the second formula. When a corporation uses sweatshops, it is treating workers as mermaids, essentially like as a tool, as a machine just to generate profit. By failing to provide a living wage or a safe environment for the workers, the corporation is actually ignoring the workers' own goals, like the health, survival, and all of that. So, because it uses people as objects for financial gain, this model actually fails on the second formulation, violates and therefore violates the human dignity. Now, let's see the last formulation, or the third one, which is the kingdom of ends. Kant asks us to act if we are a legislating member, like in an universal community of people who actually, in which everyone respect each other and treat each other as equal. So imagine a community where everyone follows the same rule, laws, and respect everyone's freedom. This is the kingdom of the ends. Now, in harmonious in this kingdom, which is very harmonious, like no rational leader or CEO will ever pass a law that allowed for their own exploitation for the worker. So by operating sweatshop, the corporation acts as if it is above the law, like like the moral law. So this is made by, they usually do, creating a hierarchy of exploiters and exploited rather than a kingdom of equals where everyone treats each other the same. So this therefore destroys moral harmony, and therefore it's not moral. Now, this is where the ontology differs significantly from utilitarianism. So an utilitarian might justify a sweatshop if it provides jobs to thousands and cheap goods to millions, arguing itself like the greater good or something. However, a Kantian, the ontologist, rejects this completely without any doubt, because it is always wrong to violate the rights of or dignity of even one person, regardless of how much happiness it brings to the others. So, because that person is an end in themselves. And therefore, this is the differentiation, like the key to understand the difference between these two concepts. Now, in summary, the sweatshop's business model fails every test it can provide. So it cannot be made into universal law because it treats human beings as tools just for profit. And it obviously disrupts the moral community. If it can't, profit can never justify the violation of one's moral duty. Now, for conclusion, um, the ontology provides a strict moral flaw for global business, and it serves as a reminder that human rights and dignity are non-negotiable, and cannot be sacrificed or for a corporation or just for social benefit. So this was my presentation. Thanks so much for watching.